Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're grinding out bicep curls or muscling the couch across the living room, crushing morning miles, or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, Smoothie King has fuel to help you maximize your workouts, own your recovery, and elevate your game. Give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs with a lineup of delicious smoothies made to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.
Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today I am here with Briana N Cox, who I am very excited to feature today on the podcast. We are going to talk a little bit about a novel that she is working on, but we have a few other very important topics to discuss today. So for our listeners, Briana was born and raised in Tullahoma, Tennessee, a town inexplicably found on state maps. And it just got a Publix. I understand that, being from a small town myself that has a post office and literally nothing else. She is the oldest of 7 children and a first-generation academic with degrees in cognitive linguistics, Japanese language, and speech-language pathology. In 2019, she became a fellow with the TN Playwright Studio and has been writing stage plays and low-budget film scripts ever since. She's been featured on the 2024 list for emerging screenwriters and has placed in the Oscars Academy Nicole Fellowship. Her debut horror novel is an adaptation of her award-winning unproduced script. Hi, Briana. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me on for today.
I'm so excited to have you on and really looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Life is crazy right now for everybody.
Really, really is. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your writing.
So you touched on it a little bit in the bio there. I really just have my fingers in everything for the most part because I write plays that need to be movies and movies that need to be books and books that need to be plays. So I kind of just write everything. And that's where I've been at since like the late 2010s, like getting on into COVID. I've been working more with getting this book finally published and finally put out into the world. So that is the most recent thing I've got going on, actually, is my book called Indigent. So I called the book that because no one knows what it means. And I think it is a very important word for people to know what it means. It is a medical term referring to people who are not able to receive medical care from the states because they make too much money, but they don't make enough money to actually cover any of their medical costs. So they're in that limbo of being called like medically indigent, where a lot of people in the United States are. I want people to know what that term is so they can start using it more because it is a very legally and socially important term. And that is what my entire book is about, is just looking into the personal and the social and the political impacts of the American healthcare system and just the abject terror and horror of the trauma it has caused people, because it is a horror book in the end of the day.
Which is very fitting because the American healthcare system is a bit of a horror story itself.
There's literally never not been a time where it hasn't been awful for people. It's one of the reasons why I was really excited to talk with you and be on your podcast for today, because we wanted to talk more about just the inherent intersections of social politics into literature and into books in general. And I feel pretty comfortable talking about that because my book, even though it is this grungy, gory body horror story, is inherently a very political monster in the end of the day. And I always like to tell people that like even the stupidest things on the face of the planet have some kind of political thing going on in them in the entertainment world, and that escapism does not exist. So I really like talking about that with people, and I hope to touch more on that with you today too.
How about you tell us a little bit about the plot behind Indigent?
Indigent started out, like you touched on, as a movie script, and it has done very, very well awards wise and very, very poorly in money wise because it is about cannibalism for the most part, and people do not want to give you money to make a cannibalism movie. Fun fact, it's very hard to do. But it is like this really contained story taking place in an apartment in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's just like this crumbling, old, about to be torn down apartment complex in the middle of the city in a neighborhood that's in the process of being gentrified and kicking all these people out anyway. And there's a group of squatters with a very serious parasitic illness show up and make everything worse. And it's just a book of everything being made worse. And then it literally explodes and then it's over. If that sounds interesting to you, pick up my book. Pre-orders are in October for the spooky month, so that's convenient.
Well, that's exciting. Do you have a release date yet?
Right now, Indigent is being published through Graveside Press, which I am super excited about. They're a relatively newer, like upcoming horror imprint that's really dedicated to making sure that they like tell diverse stories and do it well. So I'm really excited to work with them. And for now, the release date is October for pre-orders and then March in 2026 for actually buying it. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Be on the lookout, and Must Love Books podcast will absolutely share some reminders when pre-orders open and when your book releases.
Yes, thank you.
Because I'm excited. This sounds so interesting, and it sounds like even if you don't like horror, I think that this is one that I'll still kind of recommend because of
It,
the important topics it touches on.
yeah, it very much falls into like the literary horror genre. So it's got like horror elements, but if you're someone who likes literary fiction or contemporary fiction, I feel like you will also like this book because it's equal parts both of those.
I love that. And I do love kind of like a cross-genre blend. It keeps stories more open to people to explore when they're kind of starting to branch out a little bit. It's kind of like a transition genre.
Yeah, definitely. I've been comparing it a lot, both when I was shopping it around and to just like gauge if people are interested in reading this, to Woman Eating by Claire Kohda, that literally describes itself as a literary vampire novel. So if you have not read Woman Eating, that is an awesome book and you should read it. And if you read it and you enjoy it, you will probably also enjoy my book.
So when we first started talking about having you on the show and you recommended Woman Eating as one of your comp titles, I immediately went and picked it up. And I have to say, that novel blew me away.
Yeah, it is amazing. Like anyone who follows me on social media for 2 seconds knows I love vampire media. So when that book came out, I was like hyped. Like I love most things with vampires in them, even if they're just like pulpy and awful and ridiculous. But Claire Kohda is like an excellent writer who really interweaves things like racial identity and colonialism and all of these deeper topics into what is still a very pulpy vampire novel. It has a lot more bite to it, pun totally intended, with what it's got going on.
I love when vampire novels have a little bit of a pun in it too. So you and I have been connecting over threads primarily, and that is what led to this episode for today. And we have been discussing a lot on the political nature of books and how reading in itself is an inherently political act. And so that is the bulk of our discussion for today. Let's just dive into it.
Yeah, and there are 2 million avenues we could go down with this discussion. Yeah, TLDR, reading is inherently political. And in most cases, especially if you're just reading something light and fluffy and like not that important, quote unquote, those are usually the books that are used as the gateway to more political censorship. So if those are the kinds of books that you like and you really enjoy, you should care about reading being political even more than people reading like boring, stuffy nonfiction about history. Because the books you like are usually the ones being attacked by things, which is what I really want to emphasize.
Yes, like I see a lot of people suggesting that like smutty, spicy books have nothing to do with politics, and yet those are often, at least recently, the ones that are being mostly targeted. on the surface. And I think that there is just some disconnect in understanding that attacking the ones that are easier to attack then makes it easier to attack other genres and other styles of writing and other authors. And yes, we'll go into these ones because they're explicit and, they're dirty and they're raunchy, and we can't have that. And then they can turn that around and use that as a reason to target, for example, books featuring LGBTQ storylines and authors and characters. And it's a slippery slope. It's, opening a can of worms if we allow the powers that be, whatever legislative, whether that's state, local, whether it's school boards, whether it's federal governments, to have that power to ban certain types of books, then it really just opens that can of worms to banning more in the future because they never just stop. Book banning never really just stops with one thing. It always spirals and continues on. And that really restricts a lot of the things that we can read. So yes, even reading your smutty, spicy little stories is still very political because that's what is under attack first.
Yeah, there's been a concept literally going back to the very first like American court case about literary censorship, where it just goes into this idea of like literary merits and no one knowing what literary merit really entails. And all the way back into the 1800s to literally into the 2010s, this concept of literary merit has been used to, like what Krystle was saying, like go after things that people have decided don't have literary merits. Because, oh, if it has merit, then we can keep it around. But if it doesn't have merits, that's a good excuse to censor it. And the things that they think don't have merit are very conveniently things like women expressing their sexuality or brown people talking about anything. And all of these books that they have just arbitrarily decided don't count as something with merits. And they have these incredibly vague definitions like, oh, it doesn't have merit if it is indecent. Like, it doesn't have merit if it goes against cultural values. What does that mean? No one knows. And no one knows because it is intended to be vague enough to encompass every single thing the people making this law do not like. So this idea that like, oh, if you read smut, you're fine from this because it's kind of just stupid and light and it's not trying to be anything important, I think is missing the point that smut especially is this canary in the coal mine where people are going to go after that first because it's easy to like degrade as not important and easy to open the door into saying, well, this is indecent. And you know what else is indecent? Acknowledging the existence of gay people or acknowledging the existence of women who want a divorce from their husbands, which was a big one back in the 80s, or acknowledging the existence of like more systemic issues. All of these are indecent, just like porn. And that's all they want to call all of this stuff is like, oh, it's porn, so we can get rid of it. It is very nefarious, and people need to kind of be on top of it and not fall for that rhetoric that because it's not important, that it's not going to impact things broadly.
Yes, exactly. And coming for the easy targets, like, sure, does it seem silly to people, especially those who are not readers, to fight for smutty books? Like, I guess I can see why non-readers would see that as like, why do you care kind of thing. And there are even some readers who kind of see it that way, and I guess they're entitled to that opinion. But going after the easy targets, I mean, first of all, that's just rude to go after an easy
Yeah.
target. There's just a level of rudeness there to go after something just because you can. But I guess that's kind of a overarching theme of many political opponents is just go for the easy targets. But by allowing these things that seem less important because you don't assign that literary merit to them, you don't see value because, oh, it's just porn in quotations, allowing them to just get rid of those things because they're less important, then at what point do you stop saying things are less important? Where is that line
Mm.
on, oh, it's not important, so we can just ban it? And in which case, if it's not important, why does it need to be banned? First of all, if it's so unimportant, why the fight to ban it? And secondly, at what point do things stop being too unimportant that we don't need them in regards to art and expression.
There's a lot of very elitist and pretentious dialogue happening, where it's like, oh, this is for commoners, therefore we can get rid of it, which is incredibly insulting and has been insulting literally since they've begun doing it. And this idea that they can write something off as being like too pornographic for mass consumption has literally been their go-to excuse for hundreds and hundreds of years at this point. Where I believe it was the 1870s. Like all of these like book and literature bans happened under the pretense of like anti-vice activism. Like all of these books, they're like smutty and they're weird and they're causing vice in the populace. So we can't let people like disseminate them. So it banned like the mailing of any content that people considered quote unquote pornographic. And that was stuff like erotic writing, but it was also just like medical anatomy texts and like
Right?
women's reproductive health texts and like anything from like a minority point of view was really considered like too pornographic to send in the mail, which means no one could get a hold of it back in the 1800s. So that idea that like we can label things as being like smutty and bad, and that is why no one can have them, has been the go-to excuse to just get rid of stuff for forever. And what I really want to emphasize is like what people refer to as indecent or pornographic is like incredibly broad and like just genuinely makes no sense half the time. I think Oscar Wilde is a good example where he was a gay man back in the Victorian times, and nothing he writes is explicit by our standards.
Yeah,
He kind of just
absolutely.
vaguely alludes to like guys thinking other guys are pretty. And that was too much back when Oscar Wilde was writing. Like literally got thrown in jail for writing pornographic material. And that is what we are seeing now pretty much, where any allusion to queerness, especially with this new Supreme Court finding that happened literally, where LGBT books are just considered inherently divisive and inherently a problem, even if they only vaguely allude to like queer people existing. Like goes all the way back to, like I said, times, right? It has been the same playbook for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I really just wish people would get wise to it at this point.
So I want to touch on the Oscar Wilde note, because one, you're completely accurate, but I just find it interesting comparing how the writing was then compared to today, because there are so many people today who don't understand that The Picture of Dorian Gray was a gay story. Because it was that vague and that subtle in the writing, and yet he still went to jail for 2 years for writing it. And that really just shows you, like, where is that line on quote unquote indecency and it being pornographic, because it was so subtle that readers today don't even catch it,
Yeah,
that this is a
people
gay
told me.
story.
Yeah.
And yet he went to jail for 2 years for writing it.
Yeah, not only that, he went to jail for 2 years for writing something that was already like self-censored to be less gay. I think people are saying he cut anywhere between like 500 to 1,000 words of content from the original Picture of Dorian Gray that was like quote unquote too explicit. And like the self-censored version that to Oscar Wilde was appropriate for public consumption was what got him thrown in jail for gross indecency and for making false arts, according to the courts. And like
And
that's what it was. Like the thing that the actual gay person writing the book thought was like so subtle no one would catch it. And is so subtle no one catches it now was still considered so extreme back then that it got him in a lot of trouble.
the thing is, some of these bills that have been proposed and so far have not passed, thankfully. Um, this is exactly what some of these bills have been calling for, is for even just writing it. Even if it's not, formally published, but whether it's self-published or just put on the internet, even just writing stuff that has quote unquote explicit gay anything involved in it, they want people in jail for. And so they're trying to push us back literally hundreds of years and using the same exact, almost word for word reasons to try to justify these bills.
We're still calling things grossly indecent in 2025,
Right?
like we were in 1803.
And it just really goes to show that, I mean, that right there, in my opinion, is the number one argument to prove that books are political and reading is political. Because hundreds of years later, we're still having this fight.
Mm-hmm.
And if books were not political, they wouldn't ever try to ban them. And this conversation wouldn't even need to happen.
And I really do want to emphasize for the people who are a little bit skeptical, we're like, oh, I don't read queer fiction. I'm not personally into it, so it's not impacting me. This also really, really heavily impacts just any literature having to do with women having autonomy. And I know so many women now have come out and said, like, reading like romance books or reading things that are like described as erotica or smut has like helped them with their own autonomy and helped them with like sexual expression and sexual freedom. And that is all really great and really awesome. And that is why so many people are trying to ban or attack those specific kinds of books, because way back since like the 1960s, books about women's autonomy and women being free to do what they want have been one of the centerpieces, along with queer literature, in this gross indecency conversation. One of the big kind of landmark court cases about gross indecency and literary merit when it comes to censorship was about Lady Chatterley's lover. It's not explicit at all, but it's just about this rich woman having an affair with her gardener because she wants a divorce from her husband. And that was considered grossly indecent, because how dare it depict this woman who wants a divorce and is having an affair in this sympathetic light? How dare it show her perspective of this situation? And you can tell where their head was at, because the literal argument against it was, do you want your wife reading this? Do you want your servants reading this? Like, oh, I wonder what they're worried about. I wonder what their main concern is in banning this book. And it is women and the help feeling like they have autonomy over anything.
We can't have autonomy. What?
And that is always what it goes down to, is these people with systemic and systematic power not wanting these other groups that have been marginalized to feel like they can be the main character in anything, to feel like they have a choice in anything. And that is always what it goes back to, is we don't want people to know that this is something that they even have the option to have or the option to enjoy, because that throws our power and clout into question.
And it really just goes to show that book banning has really nothing to do with indecency or impurity and everything to do with control. Controlling what people read, controlling how people think, and not wanting people to broaden their horizons and expand their thinking and discover more about themselves and the world around them. They want to keep people boxed up and limiting communication, limiting expression of ideas and thoughts and feelings. They don't want us to improve and do better. And that is something that we learn through reading. It doesn't have to be like a historical textbook for you to learn from something. And that's why they want to ban. It has nothing to do really with indecency. Indecency is just an easy rally cry to exhibit control over the masses.
Yeah, and I believe like the actual definition of like grossly indecent or obscenity in the legal sense for hundreds of years was just like without socially redeeming value.
Yes.
So it was just them saying, like, we are determining what has social value in this situation. And it just so happens that everyone we don't like writing about stuff we don't like has no social value, and the stuff we do like does. And I believe it was in the 70s with Lady Chatterley's Lover, actually, where they changed that definition of obscenity into something that doesn't have literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, which at least broadened it to allow for other perspectives. I still don't necessarily agree with that definition. I don't think the word obscenity should be a legal term, but it's at least a better one now. but we are really, really backsliding, especially with some of this legislation coming out of places like Texas or Middle America, where we're really trying to go back to that old definition of obscenity, which is just, I don't personally think it adds anything to the conversation. And it's just some old white Christian guy who doesn't like women knowing that orgasms exist.
Right? I think anyone who wants to ban romance books is honestly really just telling on themselves.
Yeah, what 100% of the time, usually. It's just them not wanting men specifically to know like what their options are and to know that they actually have a choice in romantic partners and that men don't all act in this certain way and you don't have to settle for men who act in this certain way.
I have actually seen men of the internet complain that romance novels encourage women to raise their standards.
Oh no, the horrors.
Right? And I'm like, is that supposed to be a bad thing? Well, I guess if you're that guy, it's a bad thing. But yeah, women have choices, and if you can't be better, then that's on you. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you at that point. Like that says more about you than it does women.
And it all just goes back to acknowledging these different perspectives, where, like, the patriarchal white dude perspective is that a guy who never talks to you and doesn't really consider your feelings ever, but he's at least physically present, is the apex of a relationship. And then we have like these women writing fiction where they show you this is how I would prefer a man to act and what like actual romance looks like. And they do not enjoy that depiction at all because it puts work on them essentially.
Yes. I've seen it said that these modern generations of women are some of the first generations of women to not physically need to depend on a man because we can work jobs, we can own our own property, we can have our own money. And so we have many choices available to us that our grandparents did not have, or great grandparents, or, depending on which generation specifically you're in. And because we don't need to rely on a man in order to literally survive, men now have to develop personalities and be likable in order to get girlfriends or wives. And that I have seen is one of the biggest reasons why today certain types of men are attacking romance novels because they don't want to have to put in that work to be likable. They just want a woman to need them because the traditional gender roles.
Which I know is very.
Class is now in session, and the UPS store is here to help you ace arriving on campus. Our certified packing experts can pack everything you need, from desktops to decor. Plus, when you pack and ship with us, you get our exclusive pack and ship guarantee. Your items arrive safe or your money back. Restrictions and limitations apply. To get a 20% off packing coupon and for full details, visit theupsstore.com/packing.
Sad to me because I feel like traditional gender roles are literally impossible in the year of our Lord 2025. You cannot have a single
Yes.
income household. Your wife is going to have a job.
Well, and the number of men I've seen say that they want a woman to, still have a job because she can't be a freeloader, but she still has to, take care of the kids and clean the house because that is her job. And like, how do you expect that to work?
Yeah, it's all very confusing, and they got to do some soul searching on their own with that.
Yes.
It always just reminds me of what's it called? The Stepford Wives, the Ira Lemming
Yes.
book, which very ironically was written by a guy in the 70s. So men have gotten it for a long time. They have just not wanted to do anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the Stepford Wives made a really great horror movie.
It's an excellent horror movie. And
Like
it
the,
is.
the ultimate nightmare is actually being a Stepford wife.
Oh, and it is a really good kind of segue too, because the Stepford Wives touched on both like women's rights, but also like socio-political racial politics, where everyone in Stepford is like super excited that a single Black family is moving into town and really excited about like assimilating them into Stepford. Where it really touches on like content wise, the like racial implications of that really patriarchal like traditional mindsets. And yeah, reading is political in a bunch of other ways, like touching on racial politics too, which is very relevant in the States where it was literally illegal for minorities to either be taught how to read or show that they knew how to read for over 100 years. So
Yes.
saying reading is not political in that context is literally insane to me when it was an actual literal political ruling that reading was illegal for certain people.
And sometimes the punishments, I mean, for starters, the punishment against the enslaved people who were caught reading or proving that they could read or being taught to read was far harsher than any sort of punishment that a white person would have faced for doing a far more serious crime. The punishment was brutality, and in many cases, being murdered for knowing how to read. That is an extremely political stance. I don't understand how people can say that there is nothing political about that because it was extreme violence for reading, even if it was reading like a Bible, which is, by these same people considered to be like the big holy book that everyone should read, but not people we don't want reading. Like, make it make sense. There's no justification for it. And then they'll still turn around and say reading has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah, I believe getting lashed or like whipped was the default punishment for it, which obviously escalated to very many people just getting flat out lynched by the end of it. And it also varies by a lot of it was called like master's discretion. So like they
Yes.
could choose how harsh the punishment would be, and they could choose to like not punish you at all, or they could choose to kill you, and both of those were legal because it was just up to their discretion.
There was no uniformity. There was no agreed upon ruling on punishment minimums or maximums. It was just up to the discretion of the last people who should have had choices of anything.
Yeah, the only thing they agreed upon was that they did not want Black people, and not just enslaved Black people, but like freedmen, and also like they called them mulattoes at the time, so like mixed race people. They didn't want those people knowing how to read either, and they didn't want those people teaching other people how to read. And they
Let's
didn't want those
see.
people being taught how to read. So it was literally just the only through line was we do not want people of color to be literate.
Could the reason for that be? It's almost like reading is inherently political, and just being able to read is political because of how much it broadens your horizons and opens up doors just being able to read. If it
Yeah,
wasn't
just being
political, it wouldn't have been
able,
restricted.
yeah, to like just disseminate information more. So there was a large fear, especially in the South, of people like in northern states learning how bad slavery was because slaves were writing stuff down, and like that writing could be sent like to other places. So they just really wanted this tight, strict information control where they did not want anyone to know the perspectives of the people of color who lived here. And just restricting literacy was one of the easiest ways to do that because it was ye olden days. Reading was how everything was gotten across. Like
Yep.
they did not have radio, they did not have television. Like if you wanted people in far-flung areas to know what was happening to you, writing it down was how you did it. So they wanted to make sure Black people could not write down what was happening. And that seemed to be just their main point.
Yeah. And I mean, that right there is really all the empirical evidence that's needed to prove that reading is political.
And as a Black writer myself, like I'm particularly invested in kind of debunking or like working against reading is just for fun. Reading is not political because like people who looked like me for hundreds and hundreds of years, even if they just wanted to read for fun, could get in trouble for it. Even if they just wanted to write something stupid that didn't mean anything, they would get in trouble for it. And that meant death for them a lot of the time. So this idea that reading is somehow arbitrary, if like the content of what you're reading or writing is just light and loosey-goosey and fun, doesn't really track with me because like even the act of writing something stupid was illegal for people like me back in the day. So Yeah, this idea that bringing quote unquote identity politics into it is unnecessary or that we just shouldn't care does not make historical or social sense at all and just belies a lot of privilege and just not understanding why it is so important.
Absolutely. I'm just appreciating what you said. Absolutely. Just to kind of piggyback on your own words, it really just goes to show that even writing something silly and frivolous and something that might not feel like it has great meaning to it, even something as simple as that still means so much in the whole world, really. Like in the world of writing, every little thing counts, even if it's something silly.
And I did want to touch on that is an excellent point you made, where it's more of a global problem and even like sillier stuff being important. Where what is happening literally right now in China, I really wanted to bring more attention to, where it's a bunch of queer writers, most of them, if not all of them, queer women, writing just danmei or just like boys' love stories. And all of them are pretty much like light and fun and what most people over in the West would call like smut. And they are getting politically persecuted right now. Like they are getting arrested and given like years in prison if they can't make bail. And they're just being put under detainment and probation for the crime of writing, once again, what the Chinese government has determined to be grossly indecent. So there it is again. So yeah, it is an international problem of even like the fluffy fun things being stuff that gets people in trouble when they are in a marginalized group for creating or consuming. And I wanted to really bring attention to that because that is literally happening right now. Like I'm getting IRL updates about who is and is not in jail in that community. So that is like, I don't want to say a portent of what's to come in America because I don't want to treat everything that happens internationally as like a learning lesson for people in my country. But I just want people to know that like this is an option and this is happening to people and it has happened in America before. And we should really care about it a lot more, especially if you're one of the ladies who enjoys spice and smuts and all of these light, fluffy things.
It really just goes to show the importance that when people say reading is not political, they're really attributing it to a very American viewpoint because reading is something that is political in the entire rest of the world and has been historically and even today something that is restricted or targeted in more places than just outside of the US. So I think it is very much showing when giving the books aren't political viewpoint, it's showing the very narrow-minded view focusing only on their immediate circle and not expanding globally because politics are not just a United States of America thing. Politics are global. Politics are worldwide.
And it's not just a matter of space either, but time. For literally the 1980s, there was like horrific literary censorship in America. So not only is it a very narrow viewpoint of just being very America centric, but also just like 21st century America centric, where I really encourage people to branch out and like read more. You like reading, so read more about what has happened and is happening outside of like your immediate perspective. Because, like, the thing that is good about reading is that it helps you broaden your viewpoints on things. So, if what you are reading is not broadening your viewpoints on things, I really recommend you try to branch out more.
One thing that I have noticed is a lot of people who believe the books aren't political view seem to think that politics just means Democrat or Republican. And I think part of the disconnect is a lot of people not fully understanding what politics are, like what is political. And I think that's where a big part of the disconnect is we're not learning, whether that's in school or through personal reading outside of school, what really is political and how everything, existence is political. And it's not just Republican or Democrat.
Yeah, being apolitical is A, a privilege, and B, really just an indication that whatever the status quo is right now is fine with you. And like, if that is like good, great, I'm glad you're happy. But like apoliticalness is not helpful broadly, and it is also not helpful to you because at some point the status quo is not going to be in your favor, and you are going to be on the receiving end of the status quo being very negative. And we're seeing that with women in the book world right now, where the status quo has shifted to targeting them now. And they're so stuck in this mindset of being apolitical because for so long they haven't been targeted really, that I think lots of people just don't know how to get out of it. And they don't know how to acknowledge that entertainment media is inherently like both a reflection of reality and a response to what is happening in reality. So there's no way to get out of the politics of the situation, which is why I said to begin with, escapism does not exist. So you are inherently escaping from something. So even if something is just light and happy and fun and cozy, the fact that it exists to help you escape from something in real life is a political act, and it exists for a political reason, and you should care what that reason is.
And to just further comment on that, everything is political, including being apolitical. In fact, I would argue that choosing to be apolitical is an extremely political stance. Supporting the status quo is political. Enjoying your privilege is political. Choosing to stay out of politics is still a political stance because allowing the current politics to just thrive as is still supporting politics.
Doing nothing is still doing something. Like something is
Yes.
still happening. Like you're just letting it happen if you choose not to do something. And letting it happen is still an action. Like it's the political trolley problem situation. Like you can choose to touch the lever or you can choose to not touch it. But either way, someone is getting run over by a train.
Yes, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yes.
And there are lots of people, I think, now who think, oh, if I just opt out and I choose not to touch the lever, then I can say I wasn't involved at all, which is not the case because you could have chosen to touch the lever and you didn't. So you still made a choice, you still did an action. You cannot opt out of the politics of the situation.
Yeah,
And like,
there's no
especially
such thing as
for
truly being
women.
in politics.
And I believe I made a post a little bit ago in response to the whole Sabrina Carpenter controversy, where it's like, oh, is it satire? Is it feminist? Blah, 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 blah. And that's an ongoing conversation. But I made a post specifically about why it is important to talk about media in a socio-political context, because so much of it seems like unimportant. Like, why are you talking about a book when the world is on fire? Why are you talking about an album cover when the president is being insane over here? And I like to tell people that media and media analysis and being more mindful and critical of the entertainment media that you are consuming is a really, really great way to start understanding more about the social politics of existence, in a great way to understand more about how to be critical about your own interaction with politics, precisely because entertainment media is like low stakes. Like if you're wrong or like have a weird take on smut or like Sabrina Carpenter's album cover, like the world's not going to end. Like it's not some huge giant part of your personality and personhood to acknowledge other people's perspectives on this situation. So it really leaves you more open to learning and growing because it's not some hugely important issue. And if people are not open to learning and growing for something quote unquote unimportant, like books, they are not going to do it for something important, like what they think politics is. Like if someone isn't going to listen to me for 5 seconds about how like Twilight is a very problematic book and you should not give Stephanie Meyer money, they are not going to listen to me about who to vote for or what policies are harmful. So that low stakes, like entertainment media analysis is like vitally important for people, which is why I'm really banging this drum of books being political, because it's a very accessible way to get people to think about these things more and to be more open to learning. And I know it's happened with a few people. It's very hard to get people out of that apolitical mindset, but it has happened. So I'm going to keep trying.
And I think in the end, that's all we can do is just keep trying. Because, of course, you're not going to force anyone to think differently. But I think as long as we try to keep the conversation open and try to keep the conversation moving and accessible for everyone in as many ways that we can, then I think that is just doing our part and doing what we can. Maybe that little sliver will move a little bit and people will start to open up more to those conversations just by them being accessible and being exposed to them.
Yeah, I've spent most of my time really just trying to get people to stop using those like thought terminating cliches of like, it's not that deep. Why are you thinking about it this much? It's not that important. It's just a book. It's just smut. It's just blah, blah, blah. And all of those are just like a thought terminator to stop you from thinking about stuff more. So I really encourage people, like if you find yourself wanting to say, why does someone care about this? It's not that deep, to like stop and ask yourself why you do not think it is that deep and why someone else does. Because that is really more of the opening to having this conversation and to growing intellectually and sociopolitically as a person, which is important to do when you are an adult.
That is a really excellent way of putting it, and really simple advice that all of us internet existing people can really just kind of take into our day-to-days, because I've caught myself doing that before. Like, why do you care? Well, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be why do you care? It should be why don't I care?
Yeah, and
So I
sometimes
love
it's a
that.
totally valid like answer, like I don't care because what they care about is irrelevant, and that is 100% accurate. But sometimes what they care about is actually legitimate and should be listened to, and you should be open to entertaining that idea, especially if they're like a marginalized person who is telling you on the basis of their marginalization that something is harmful.
Yes.
Because a lot of the times they know better than you. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but a lot of the times they are going to catch stuff that you do not catch, and that is fine. Like it's not making you a bad person that you didn't know, but it does kind of make you a bad person if you're told and you still don't interact with that knowledge that you've been given. So, like,
Yes.
ignorance is not the thing that is bad, but continuing to remain ignorant even after people have tried to give you information is.
When ignorance becomes willful, that's when it becomes a problem. Because, of course, not everyone's going to know everything, especially, depending on how you were raised. I mean, there are definitely places where education is very, very different and very, very restrictive. And I can understand not knowing many things, especially in regards to marginalized communities. I can understand because the education was restricted. But then when you're an adult, that's really on you to undo and to learn from. And if you're choosing not to, then that's kind of your problem then. Like if you're choosing not to broaden your horizons and choosing not to continue your education just because it's how you were already raised.
And I try to really extend grace in that area because, like, going back to what we were saying with most, if not everything, being political, education is political. It is literally impacted by policy. It is a political thing, and lots of people's education has been systematically just nerfed. Like people are not learning stuff. Like I am a Black woman in the South, and almost everything I know about Black history and women's history, I had to learn as an adult because I was not taught in school. Like I had to like take it upon myself to learn and know more and to acknowledge that I was not taught things to like go beyond this incredibly like ignorant mindset that like even I as a marginalized person was in. Like, I did not know the extent of like literacy laws in the South. I did not know about the history of book banning until I went into it and saw how stupid the reasonings were.
Right.
Like, if you were to ask me, I would have thought that there was never any literary censorship ever in America because it's always been so cool and freedom. But I had to learn that that was not the case. So I am fine with people not knowing in a country where we have been systematically kind of disenfranchised and it comes to being given an education. But when I said you are an adult, you have to kind of take it upon yourself to know what you don't know and learn more, especially if it is impacting things that are important to you. So, like, if you like reading and reading has been this like good experience that has helped you grow as a person and express yourself more and know more about what you enjoy, like sexually or otherwise, then you should care about all of these different policies that are impacting books and the history of books that is coming back around in a pendulum to bite everybody in the ass right now. So these are things you should care about if this is like a hobby you care about. And being ignorant is not the crime here. And I feel like lots of people, especially like white people in the United States, feel kind of called out and feel like they're being insulted as a person if someone points out that they don't know something or that they're not acknowledging something. And just like, babes, you got to get over that. Like, people aren't being mean to you
Right.
when they point out that you don't know something. They're pointing out you don't know something. And Conflict is Not Abuse, which is a book I really like, and you should all read it.
I think it is just really important for anyone listening with us here today to just focus on keeping an open mind. The main thing I want people to take away from this podcast episode today is allowing yourself to analyze the political nature of books. And that does not mean you need to sit down and every time you read a book, write a whole dissertation, even in just a mental dissertation on the political aspects of this book, but to just understand like how even being able to sit and read, no matter what it is you choose to read, is a political act, and why it is so important for all people to have that same access and freedom to reading that we enjoy. And I want to thank you so, so, so much, Briana, for coming on and having this conversation with me today. I have really appreciated going back and forth with you on this and having your thoughts and being able to share my platform with you. And I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. So we were talking about how you could have an entire podcast on any one of these topics we touched on. So definitely, if we said one thing in this podcast that you thought was interesting and you want to learn more about it, I encourage you to look more into it because this is a vast, vast, vast subject that we only touched the surface on for today. And I'm really, really happy that you had me on for today to just like give that little intro for people.
Yes, this was just the introductory course. Books are Political 101. Today is just day one. And you know, if there's anything that you take from this podcast today, please just take being open with your communication. Keep talking about books, keep talking about the political nature of books, and invite others into the conversation. You know, spread the word. The best way to fight against those who want to restrict our books is to just keep the conversation moving and keep it going. Elevate those who are already talking about these conversations and invite others into the conversation to just really keep it going, because talking is, communicating with each other is just as important as reading. And whether that is just talking about what you're reading or talking about the implications of what you're reading, just keep talking about books, keep sharing books, and keep the conversation going.
So follow the American Library Association, follow Writers Against Book Bans, all these different groups that keep you in the know about the very, very relevant real life stuff happening with books now, I think is a good takeaway if you take away nothing else from this episode.
Yeah, and I will share some links to those associations in the episode description for easy access.
Right, awesome.
All right. So, well, thank you. Thank you again so much, Briana, for joining me today. This has really been wonderful, and it was really, really great having you on, truly.
Thank you. And should I plug myself? I don't know.
Do it. Go
Follow
for
me
it.
on social media if you like me ranting about things. I also do book recommendations. So if you like books, I do that as well. I am Pedro Paro too on Instagram and Threads. If you like my ranting and you like books, you should follow me.
And I will include those links in the episode description as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @MustLoveBooksPodcast. Thank you and happy reading.
Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're crushing morning miles or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.